Fear of whole grains is probably hurting your fitness results. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. But a quick reminder, if you guys would please click like down below, I would greatly appreciate it. If you are not subscribed or following, please do so. And if you would be so kind as to leave me a comment down under the video, I would greatly appreciate that. So thank you so much. And it can be just to discuss the video, say hello, whatever. Just drop me a comment. So over to the point of the video. All right, this is really based on pseudoscience. This entire idea historically that grains were somehow harmful to our fitness or health, not based on reality. In fact, everyone who's ever claimed that grains somehow harm society, or that they found evidence that when a society introduced grains that it did anything but increase lifespan and population, is generally a quack. That's not supported by any science that's out there, any research or people who've dug through the past. And keeping in mind that most of the longest lived and healthiest societies on earth are very, very much grain-based. So before someone jumps up and tries to claim, well, you know, this is whatever funding, there's no funding involved with that. Literally, all the longest lived societies on earth eat grains for most of their calories. Like, there is no conspiracy or funding involved with that. It's very easy to determine knowledge by looking at cultures around the world. So any claim to the contrary is a mark of mental illness. Like, if someone really tries to take a statistic like that and tries to claim any form of conspiracy when they could just look at the data and look at the cultures themselves, they can go research it, that person is probably really mentally ill. And if they're putting out information, that doesn't mean they're not mentally ill. Okay, they need to talk to a therapist at that point, because that's insanity. It's so provably false that there would be any conspiracy around that. They're probably a paranoid schizophrenic. Because again, you can go research this yourself with easy to find data, just looking at demographics around the world. So let's get that out of the way. As far as the other stuff goes, yeah, anthropologists have all pretty much found, whenever any society on earth introduced grains, lifespan went up and the population went up. All these agricultural societies lived longer than these tribal groups. And it's a very strange claim when you see really weird pseudoscience groups like, Winston A. Price and stuff, who get called out for being like on Quack Watch and stuff over the decades. There's no evidence for that. Literally, grains were the cradle of civilization. Okay, so when people start thinking about, before we jump into where the theories have come from and how they've been debunked, we can look at basic stuff to where you can't claim, look, there's no tampering with data or conspiracy involved. You can clearly look and see that, well, grains are pretty well established to be the dominant food of the longest lived societies on earth, right? Easily dig this up yourself. And anthropology, going back way before the current modern era, also discovered this, looking back and looking at records, that whenever a society introduced grains, their population went up and their average lifespan went up. Okay? This predates any modern food industry or modern pharmaceutical industry findings. And the more modern findings have found the same thing. But anthropologists found this 100 years ago. Right? There's no modern big pharma to pay for a conspiracy. So let that sink in when you start looking at the data, and then you realize, hey, maybe the people who are telling me the opposite have some agenda, because they clearly do. They clearly have some own agenda of their own to push a fad diet of some type to make money on it, because those are two provable facts. Let's be clear on that. Those are easily provable facts that you can research yourself and find very, very quickly about history, going back thousands of years, as well as looking at demographics around the world. All right, so what's the whole idea? People believe that grains cause inflammation. And the whole concept behind this was the large amount of linoleic acid, which is a polyunsaturated fat, being linked to inflammation. Well, it turns out it's not. Modern studies have found, no, it doesn't seem to do it at all. In fact, reduces inflammation. In fact, it seems to offset some of the negatives of saturated fat. So it's kind of like when we talk about saturated fat being good or bad. It really depends on the context of the rest of your diet, doesn't it? What we find is linoleic acid seems to blunt oftentimes the lipid profile shift of some saturated fats. It actually seems to buffer against them a little bit when they've looked at it in data. Okay, kind of a big deal, especially if you want to eat your steak and red meat. You should probably know this stuff. All right, that being said, the whole idea here was an old hypothesis that said, well, arachidonic acid is inflammatory and there's a pathway in the body by which linoleic acid can create arachidonic acid. Therefore, grains are potentially inflammatory, and so are omega-6 polyunsaturated fats, which arachidonic acid is a polyunsaturated. It's just a rare omega-6. It's not found in grains or peanuts or any of that or nuts, but in theory, your body can make it. Well, and it is inflammatory. So what's been found in the studies is that it turns out in humans, not rodents, our conversion rate's really, really low. And we can create a little bit of it, but the net effect of the total anti-inflammatory effects of the linoleic acid seem to outpace the inflammatory effects of the arachidonic acid. So the net effect is slightly reduced inflammation in humans when it's been studied. Okay, so there goes your inflammation theory with it. That's gone. It's been pretty well studied. There was a hypothesis. It was an unproven hypothesis, but people ran with it. And what we find in general, grains are largely anti-inflammatory. They reduce inflammation, they reduce oxidative stress. In other words, people who consume whole grains, their total oxidative stress in their body goes down slightly because of the antioxidant properties of a lot of it. Okay, and then people will talk about certain things. Well, there could be anti-nutrients or this or that, but that's only when they're raw. When they're cooked, those levels stay well within the healthy amounts. Again, been studied pretty closely. And let's come back over to the other point. People say, well, how do we know those studies aren't biased? Because you have all the other data. So if you want to have this grand conspiracy that big brown rice is trying to poison you by getting you to eat whole grains, they must be funding these studies, right? Then how do you explain all the lifespans of the people who live on grains? Clearly, it's not having these effects, or they wouldn't all be living so long. And populations wouldn't grow and expand and live longer every time whole grains are introduced to a society, would they? So who's lying to you? Probably the people who want to sell you bacon and butter. Because isn't that what they always want you to eat, the people who are anti-grain? Isn't that what they want you to eat instead? Exactly. There's your conspiracy.